你好。老师好。嗨。
是。I need to see that. Okay, let's start. Even though we don't have too many people, but this is the beginning of the slide show, which generally has this the one slide that is not really important, which is that we are on the first and third Wednesdays of the month, live streamed on King On channel on YouTube, and the recordings are available on YouTube as well. Okay, this is the real beginning. We have a song from Les Miserables, and we have Zhuo Wenjun's poem, which may not really be written by her, but it's a lovely poem. And we are going to talk about two very serious topics. One is the Age of Enlightenment, 启蒙时期, and the other is modern theater, 现代戏剧. It could be a little dry to listen to with lots of text, but I thought this is something that we should all know before we start on anything. Okay, so we're going to talk about these two things. And the reason I chose them was, of course, because a month ago we had this class in which we mentioned things related to these two topics. And then this is a list of vocabulary. And before all that, I'm going to talk about one other thing that's not on this list, and that is Samson and Delilah. This is a biblical story in the Old Testament. 旧约圣经, It's about the Jewish people starting a revolt against some invaders. And this is, Samson is a very strong person. He could destroy a temple with his bare hands, but his strength lies in his hair. Because when his hair is cut off, he is not a strong person. And these people who captured him, they decided to get Delilah to find out the secret of his strength. So Delilah pretended to be in love with Samson, and Samson told her about his secret. So the other people, the people who captured him, cut off his hair, so he had no strength. So the Jewish people were in trouble because their only great warrior lost his strength. And this movie stars Victor Mature and Hedy Lamarr. And Hedy Lamarr was the name I was not able to remember a month ago. So she is we would call her a sexy actress. In our Zhongwen, sometimes we will call such a lady 肉弹, a bomb of flesh. Okay. So Hedy Lamarr and Victor Mature, they were not first choice of Cecil DeMille. Here on this playbill on the right-hand side, you can say the first name listed was Cecil B. DeMille, because he was so powerful and famous that he is more famous than the two leading actors. And I was watching on YouTube a documentary about the making of the Ten Commandments, 十诫. There was a very famous movie called The Ten Commandments. You could see Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner and Ann Baxter in that movie. And that movie was very, very long. And it was produced and directed by Cecil B. DeMille. So if you go to YouTube and find this documentary, of course, it can be watched for free. That was quite a story. If you know that movie well, every little detail and the gossips and the anecdotes were in there. That's a very interesting documentary. And here I am talking about this because last time we were talking about the movie, actually, it was 2-3 weeks ago, not a month ago. That was a movie called The Greatest Story Ever Told, in which we had Angela Lansbury. So I was talking about all these members of the cast, and there were some pictures of Angela Lansbury. And I remember that, and I reminded you, I talked about Samson and Delilah, and Angela Lansbury was in that movie playing Semador. Anyway, this is supposed to be Delilah's sister. However, in the original text in the Bible, it never mentioned that Delilah had a sister, but that didn't stop Cecil B. DeMille to put a sister there for Delilah. And this next slide, we can see a still photograph of Victor Mature and Hedy Lamarr. For the picture was taken with full costume of the two of them as a propaganda or advertisement for that movie. So you see that Victor Mature and Hedy Lamarr were in character in the movie Samson and Delilah. On the other hand, we had Angela Lansbury, who was a very pretty girl at that time, playing Delilah's sister. So in 1949, some reporter interviewed Miss Lansbury, and she was told that the Bible did not describe Delilah as having a sister. And Angela Lansbury quickly replied, anyway, if Delilah did not have a sister, then Mr. DeMille has supplied one. Mr. DeMille is so powerful that he could barehanded on his own give Delilah a sister. That's how powerful he was in Angela Lansbury's view. And there's a very interesting thing about the Jewishness in this movie. It is a story about the Jewish people's suffering and revolt and the eventual victory over an invader. So it's a very inspiring movie for the general public and for the Jewish people. However, at that time when it was filmed, you did not hear anywhere mentioning Jews, Hebrews, or Israelites. It was just an ancient story about a tribe of people, the tribe of Dan, and these people are called the Danites. And of course they're Jewish, but you would not know it if you just watched the movie. If you did not read about such stories before, you could not tell it was a story about the Jews. And the reason for this is because it was in the beginning of the House Un-American investigation hearings. The Congress of the United States was investigating the communist people influence and such things in America, and it became scandalous. And it was led by Joseph McCarthy. So it's called the McCarthyism. That is the 主义, the thinking of McCarthy, which was that this country was swamped with lots of traitors under the cover of communism. And he was determined to root out everyone, powerful, wealthy man or women. Joseph McCarthy wanted to find out everybody who is a secret communist believer, okay? So lots of them, those communist people or members were Jewish. Almost all the Jews in upper society were communist in their thinking, in Joseph McCarthy's thinking. So the whole country was in this kind of a white terror. That's about the same time as we in Taiwan were. We were afraid that every person of influence could be a secret communist agent or spy. And that's the same thing in the United States. Every powerful people was under suspicion of being a communist. And there were a lot of Jews who turned out to be communists. And Jewish people were very powerful in the American society, especially in Hollywood. So when they made this movie, even though it is an authentic story about Jewish people and Jewish history, they dare not mention the word Jew or Hebrew or Israelite for fear that people would think this is a communist movie, okay? That's a very weird thing in hindsight, because things are not like that anymore. And most people in this country felt it was a great embarrassment. It's a shame that the country would fall under the influence of Joseph McCarthy. And the last bullet is that Hedy Lamarr was of Jewish descent, and Cecil B. DeMille was also half Jewish on his mother's side, okay? And when we talk about Victor Mature, I invariably would think about this movie called The China Doll. and it was an American movie, maybe a Hollywood movie, made with Victor Mature and Delilah. It's about the flying tiger during World War II. And Victor Mature in this poster was handling a machine gun. And I haven't seen this movie, but I heard a lot in the newspaper because Delilah refused to be kissed on the screen by Victor Mature because she wants to keep the chaste Chinese traditional virtue. She would not kiss and just some other people on screen. At that time, we had no kissing in any Chinese movie. If you remember that time, maybe I was too old. Okay, there was a long time there was no kissing on the Chinese silver screen. Okay, let's go back to our vocabulary. The first one is Joan of Arc. We call her name Joan of Arc, which was translated into 圣女, 贞德, of Arc means a holy saint. And Joan is her name. And in French, where she was from, her name was Jeanne d'Arc. Let me see if I have one of those. Okay. The next one is Jeanne d'Arc. Jeanne d'Arc is Joan of Arc. Okay, so we go back to this one. She was born in 1412 and died in 1431, so about 18, 19 years old, not quite 20. She is a heroine, meaning she is a female hero of France. In French history, she was one of the greatest person that ever lived in their country, who died for the country and who led the people to fight their enemy until she was burned at a stake because she was convicted as a witch. At that time, if you are convicted as a witch, you would be tied on a stake and with a pile of firewood and burned to death alive. Okay, so she was suffering such a destiny when she was not even 20 years old, when the French army was in defeat by the British army. Well, at that time, there was no Britain. Okay, let's say English. Okay, English army was having a great time, triumphing over the French army. And along came Joan of Arc. She rallied the people, and they succeeded in many battles against the English army. And as a result, when she was captured by some French people, the Burgundians, these people sold her to the English army, and the English people had a trial of her and convicted her of being a witch and burned her to death. And this is during the 100-year war. 100-year war lasted over 100 years, and on both sides, the English side and the French side, there were 5 kings, one after another, throughout the over 100 years of war. And this was in the middle of that 100 years. And because of how she suffered and what she accomplished, she became a very great hero. And if you go to the downtown of Paris, you could see this golden statue of Jeanne d'Arc, right in the middle between the Arch de Triomphe and the Louvre. Musée du Louvre 是罗浮宫哈. This map on the right-hand side, you could see this is 罗浮宫. And here is the statue of Joan of Arc. And here is a large area of garden. That's called the Jardin de Durie. It used to be the king or the emperor's garden. And on this side, you have Place de la Concorde, 就是协和广场. And if you go all the way to the end, not to the end, you go about 4 or 5 blocks, you will reach the Arch of Triumph, 就是凯旋门哈. So this is the golden real estate in Paris, in the middle of the city by the river Seine. And here you can see this golden statue of Joan of Arc. And there are many, many statues of Joan of Arc. This one is also in Paris, a statue of Joan of Arc. And she was on this side. Well, a king before her, 200 years before her, Louis the Ninth was on this side. And this is Sacré-Cœur Basilica, the church or cathedral of Sacred Heart. So this is a beautiful, beautiful church on top of Montmartre. And they put 2 statues in front of this church of Joan of Arc and a very respectable great king, Louis the Ninth, on top of this church. So this is the highest point in Paris. So if you are in any other place in Paris, you will be able to look up, even especially in the night, because it's lit with the floodlights, and you will be able to see this beautiful Sacred Heart Church. And of course, this is a church called the Church of Joan d'Arc, and it's in Rouen because that's where she was burned to death. This kind of modernistic church is very big, so it takes 2 pictures to show the entire length of the church. And right on the left-hand side of this church is where Joan of Arc was burned to death. So there's a little sign that says Le Boucher, which means the burning pile of wood that killed this great lady, this young girl, well, young lady, okay? So this sign says this is where she was burned to death on March 15th. I'm sorry, not on March 15th, on May 30th, 1431. And this picture was taken by me on March 15th, 2017, when I was on the river cruise of the Seine River, Seine. And we were told that her ashes were thrown into the river. 就是丢到塞纳河里面去了哈。And this is a statue of Joan of Arc at the entrance of the church. And she became the patron saint of French resistance in World War II. During the Second World War, France was totally occupied by Nazi Germany, and all the people who are against Germany were taking all sorts of actions or engaging in activities that sabotage the German cause. And this kind of movement is called French resistance. Resistance 就是拒绝哈，或者说抵抗。So French resistance means the group of people who were against German invasion, doing things in France illegally because the country was occupied by Germany. So their patron saint is Joan of Arc. Okay, let's move on to the next word, which is harassment. Most of the time we see this word right now, it follows the word sexual harassment. So harassment is a disturbance or annoyance, all kinds of things that unwelcome activities another person impose on you that causes your life to be miserable and stressful. That's called harassment. And the sexual harassment is one kind that's involving usually a man doing the harassment on a woman who did not want any part of it. Of course, sometimes there are situations where the two roles are reversed. A woman could be sexually harassing a man. For example, there was a movie, I forgot its name, with Michael Douglas and what's the girl? Demi Moore. Yeah, they were in the movie that is about a woman boss sexually harassing a male employee. Okay, and then when you talk about harassment, it's often associated with this word coercion, or for verb we say coerce. That is to force something on someone who is not willing on himself or herself to do such a thing. So it's against a person's will. If you force this person to do things that the person did not want to do, then you are imposing a coercion. So in the legal sense, if you do something that is against your will because someone else forced you to do it, then you are not guilty of that criminal action because you are not free to choose the action that you were forced to do. Okay, so this is a simple word to learn. And here comes the word called monologue. That is somebody making a long speech by himself or herself. And it could be a speech, it could be part of a performance, and most of the time it is in a play. 在一个话剧里面, if this character was speaking a long speech to another person or to several other persons, it's called a monologue. If these people or the two of the people were talking to each other, it is called a dialogue. So mono means one, and the dia is a prefix for two. So dialogue is a communication between two people. So these are different. And on the other hand, there are several other words that are similar to monologue. One is called the soliloquy, and another is called aside. Monologue is in a play, a person make a long uninterrupted speech to another person in the play. That's called a monologue. So you're in the play, with another person. However, the other person did not speak. That person just listened while you go on and on speaking. So you are doing a monologue. On the other hand, there could be nobody else, just you, and you are talking to the audience. Actually, you are saying something that is very dear to me, your secret longing or your secret story or whatever. You are the person making this very long speech, not to anyone else on the stage, but to the audience. This is called a soliloquy. And the most famous soliloquy is the one in the Shakespearean play called Hamlet, 哈姆雷特, 王子复仇记. In this play written by Shakespeare, there was a soliloquy spoken by the prince of Danish prince, Hamlet. He was on the outskirts of the city in the wild, and some other grave diggers were digging the ground, and they uncovered a skull of a person, a human skull, 人的骷髅头. And Hamlet, being very thoughtful and always pondering, thinking about all sorts of things, he took up this skull and he made a very, very long soliloquy to this skull. Skull 就是一个骷髅头, huh? And everyone in the audience would hear what he was talking. That was his deepest thoughts and emotions. And this soliloquy contains the very famous quote, "To be or not to be, that is the question." That is just a small part of this very long soliloquy. And then comes the third similar word, which is aside. Aside is something that a character on the stage spoke to the audience, but it's very short. It's not like a soliloquy, which can go on and on and on. But it is a short comment. So this character could be talking to another person, and he thinks that just to let the audience know, he has a very short comment, such as, "He's really a fool," or "I got him fooled," or something like that. That is a short comment to the audience by a character on stage, that when he was not speaking to the other people on stage, but he was just secretly giving a quick comment to the audience. This is called aside. So you know these three words, monologue, soliloquy, and aside. They're interesting to know. Now we come to the first serious topic of the day, because all the rest were not serious. And what we're talking about is the Age of Enlightenment. Okay, the Age of Enlightenment. Enlightened means you were muddled, you were confused and something. Then you suddenly became enlightened, as if there was a light shining on you, and you suddenly became so wise and clever and know things and understand things much better than before. So this is an age that the whole world gradually became more enlightened. And I think it was translated differently before, but recently people have decided to use 启蒙时期 as the official translation for this term, Age of Enlightenment. That is, when we say 启蒙, we mean that a child goes to school for the first time, and the teacher would just open up a can of knowledge to this child. So we call this your first teacher in school is your 启蒙老师, because before you met this teacher, you were totally a fool, okay? But this teacher opened up this knowledge and wisdom and everything to you, so you became aware of all these wonderful things in the world. So this is called 启蒙, and to use these traditional two words, 启蒙, to describe the Age of Enlightenment is quite daring, I would say, because it means that all these people before the Age of Enlightenment, they were in total darkness, okay? So this is a movement of intellectual and philosophical movement that dominated Europe in 17th and 18th century. 所以是17到18世纪的一件事情, and it's global, with global influences and effect. So it started maybe in France, but it quickly grew and grew, and it influenced the entire world. This is because their world is small. They're just talking about Western Europe, and they think whatever happened in Western Europe is what happened in the whole world. You can easily see that it did not affect China, at least reached China almost more than 100 years later, I would say. Okay, so this is ranges. Pardon me? Could you say that again?
刚才那个声音有点问题。Like broken up, 现在好像好了。
So enlightenment includes
We lost the sound again.
Yeah, the sound is lost.
Now you're back.
Nope. Nope.
Now you're good. Now
we
fine.
lost you.
Unmute myself.
It's fine now.
Yes, I got out and I got back in. Thank you very much. So it's the Age of Enlightenment included a range of ideas centered on the value of human happiness, the pursuit of knowledge obtained by means of reason, and the evidence of the senses, and ideals such as liberty, progress, toleration, fraternity, constitutional government, and the separation of church and state. Just about everything that we take for granted right now came from that time. 自由、平等、博爱, and to be tolerant, and fraternity, constitutional government, and the separation of church and state. These were not within the range of a regular European person for thousands of years until the 17th century. So they were just like a child without education as far as their knowledge and thinking were concerned. But then this age dawned upon them, and it is just a monumental event. If you think this is Western Europe, what you see, it was not. It came very, very late. How did it happen is because first it was the Renaissance, or Renaissance, or Renaissance. There are many ways to read this word, and it is 文艺复兴. Since 文艺复兴, people started to look at themselves as a human being. Before that, they were just a vehicle for the church. They suffer every day, obeying the rule of the church and the kings and monarchy. But once they started to look at themselves as a real human being that has feelings and dignity, then the world changed. And it followed by the scientific revolution. There are so many different great scientists appeared. Of them, you can name Isaac Newton and many, many others, Galileo, and they all happened after the Renaissance, and people started to have great scientific research and the results. And Francis Bacon was one of the great person that influenced the people, and he was in the Elizabethan England. So these all came after the Renaissance. And so what time frame are you talking about when you talk about the Age of Enlightenment? There are many people who define this age using different dates, starting dates and ending dates. And as we just mentioned, it was in the 18th, 17th, and 18th century. And some would think René Descartes, 我们叫做笛卡尔, he is the one when he published in 1637 a book, Discourse on the Methods, 怎么说? 原理, 什么的原理, Anyway, in it, he mentioned this very famous line, which is cogito ergo sum, 就是我思故我在, I think, therefore I am. So you are a not enlightened person until you started to think. If you don't think, then you never lived. You are not a person. I think, therefore I am. You could say cogito, you could say cogito. It was from Latin. It should be cogito, actually, but now you speak in English, you would say cogito. Ergo sum. 我思故我在. And some think the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment started with the publication of Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica, that is 数学原理. Isaac Newton 就是牛顿, he published that book, a real book, a very big book, and there was one in the library in Trinity College, I think, in Dublin, and there are, of course, other copies. And this is a great book that really brings human being into a new era. So some people think the publication of Newton's book is the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment, and that is when the scientific revolution was at its peak. The word culmination means it's at the peak of scientific revolution and the beginning of the Enlightenment. And there are historians who did not want to define the beginning and the end of the Age of Enlightenment with books, publication of books. And they decided the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment is the death of Louis XIV. Louis XIV is their sun king in France in 1715. And the end of it, they think, is the outbreak of French Revolution. Well, in that case, it's only the 18th century. Some people think it's 2 centuries long, and some people think it's 1 century long. But you can tell people who think this way thought that the death of Louis XIV was a great event on people thinking, and the French Revolution would end that period of awakening. And some people now think that end of Enlightenment was when Immanuel Kant, 康德哈哲学家康德, when he died in 1804. That's a time that start of the 19th. Okay, there are all sorts of ideas. It's just something like the 18th century, okay, or 17th to 18th century. What it means is that the whole world was changed in their view, the Western Europe view. The Age of Enlightenment made people doubt or be suspicious or not to obey the authority of the monarchy and the Catholic Church. So before the Age of Enlightenment, people just strictly follows the rules of the church and the kingdom and not thinking about the future for themselves. And the Age of Enlightenment put this seeds in everyone that they could think, the so-called 我思故我在. They could think about things. They should think about themselves. They should think about the future. They should think about the government, the world, or anything you can think of, by not blindly following the rule of the powerful people. That's why you see a series of revolutions. In the 18th century, there's American Revolution followed by the French Revolution, and then lots of revolutions, for example, the independence of Latin America. All these things happened because people are thinking differently. They are no longer stupid anymore, okay? And the ideas of 19th century movement involve liberalism, communism, neoclassicism, trace their intellectual heritage to the Enlightenment. All these things that happened in 19th century can be traced to the idea coming from the Age of Enlightenment. This is the last one. So the central doctrine of Enlightenment philosophers were individual liberty and religious tolerance. In the past, the Christian church was just like the Islam faith. They were just following the church, obey the church. But from the Age of Enlightenment, they become more tolerant and they look at things a little differently, and they want to make decisions for themselves. And they believe the reason that they could they think they could decide things for themselves is because the scientific inventions and the theories that were, you can prove things by experiment. 科学实证这些都可以让你得到你的you can reach your own conclusion by yourself, not by blindly following others. And attitude, this kind of spirit you can read from Immanuel Kant's essay that says, what is enlightenment? Where the phrase saber or dare to know can be found. Okay, so 康德的名句就是 dare to know. In the past, there may be knowledge, but people were not. They were afraid to know things, but now they dare to know. Okay. Now we're going to talk about a few people we mentioned. The first one was Descartes. And when you talk about these philosophers, they are more or less against the church, the Catholic Church. So he's a French philosopher, a mathematician, a scientist, and a lay Catholic. A lay Catholic means he is not a monk or priest, but he's outside the church. And he invented analytic geometry, 解析几何或者说分析几何. This is something that he was the first to find out, that you have algebra and you have geometry, but the two of them can be linked by analytic geometry. For example, a line can be expressed as a formula of 1 degree. 一次方程式, if you noted on the coordinates, it is a straight line. And the 二次方程式 can be divided into several kinds, like a elliptic circle and hyperbolic curves and what's the other one? 一时也想不起来。就是说这个解析几何有直线，然后有双曲线，有椭圆。还有一个是什么？我居然想不出来了。Anyway, I'll tell you next time. And his famous line is "Cogito ergo sum." I think, therefore I am, or in French, which is his native country, "Je pense donc je suis." In Chinese is "我思故我在." This is a great line. You put it so simply, you could confirm your belief very easily when you have a line that is so snappy and short. And the next person is called Voltaire. And all these persons come in sequence. The earlier ones were trailblazers, and then there were followers who developed the thinking a little more, and then there were other followers. So the second after Descartes was Voltaire, and he is a writer, historian, and a philosopher. And these are great people, and they're prolific in writing. For example, Voltaire wrote 20,000 letters and 2,000 books and pamphlets. Isn't that very productive as a writer? He criticizes Christianity, especially Roman Catholic Church, and he is against slavery, and he advocates freedom of speech. Advocates 就是他主张 he is in support of this right, which is called the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and separation of church and state. So as each great philosopher comes along, you will have more developed and more thought through theories and ideas, and this would spread like wildfire. He's a versatile and prolific writer. Okay, I went through that. And he was one of the very first authors to become renowned and commercially successful internationally, just because he wrote all these books that were published not only in France, but all over the country, all the way through 20th century. His books were very successfully sold worldwide, and he could rely on selling books as a big income to make a living by selling his own books. You know that in the old days, for example, we had Confucius, or we had numerous Chinese people and foreign people who wrote wonderful books, but they were never able to make a living, a good living, by selling their books. But Voltaire was one of the early people who made a good living by selling books. And in America, I heard that the first commercially successful novelist, not a philosopher, the novelist, first very successful novelist was Jack London, and that was very late in history. It's probably in the Alaskan gold rush time. So it's probably in the second half of 19th century. You can sell, or people like Jack London could sell books, novels, and make a good living. And nowadays, of course, you know, all these famous movie stars and singers, they could make a hugely profitable life by selling their product. But in the old days, that was just unheard of. And the next person is Thomas Hobbes. And last time I was unable to name his country of origin, and he is English. Okay, I know him very little except for his name. That's why I couldn't name that he was an English philosopher, considered one of the founders of modern political philosophy. So it spread from France to other countries. And of course, later we have Kant, who was of German origin. Thomas Hobbes, his famous book, one of his famous books is Leviathan. Leviathan, okay, Leviathan, I'm sorry, Leviathan, that is a correct pronunciation. Okay, this is a monster, a sea monster in Jewish philosophy and mythology. And this monster was often mentioned in the Old Testament, the Old Bible. And Hobbes used the name Leviathan as the name of his book to describe the church and the monarchy that had tremendous power to threaten people, and we little people, we're all trying to fight against them. And he thinks that these powerful people can only justify their power over you when you agree to let them do it. So people have the power to not agree to the powerful people. This is what this book is about, the Leviathan, okay? And so he had this concept of social contract, that is, the vast majority of people who are powerless, they hold the powerful people to be responsible. They have to do things for the good of all the people in order for all the people to agree to be governed by them. And this is exactly what Rousseau the book is about the social contract. 就是说 we the people used to be controlled by the monarchy and by the church, but actually they need to get our consent to do it. Without our consent, we can overthrow them. If the powerful people don't do what we want, we can throw them out and get some other people to rule who would follow our ideas. This is an idea from Thomas Hobbes, which was later, you can see that he was in 1855 to 1679. That was still quite early, and you would have Rousseau, who came after he's dead. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau was the person who really wrote the book that's called The Social Contract, 就是民约论，或者说社约论，或者说人民的，就是说people's consent and agreement to let the powerful to rule over them. These are very new ideas, not only in China, but all over the world. For example, in 1215, there was the King John who signed into law Magna Carta, 大宪章, that in which he confessed that as a ruler, as a king, he really needs the parliament and the people to give him good advice. He is not an absolute ruler. These are all new ideas, but it became all the rage in the 18th century, or in 17th century and 18th century. So Rousseau was from Switzerland, and his political philosophy influenced the progress of the Enlightenment. He is probably the most famous of the Age of Enlightenment. 他是集大成的, actually. All the people who did those trailblazing works led to his writing of this final book that defines the Age of Enlightenment. And this influenced not just political scenes in the world, but also economic and educational thoughts. In every field, people need to think for themselves and defy the authority. So this book is called 民约论, The Social Contract. And he also wrote many other books like Emile and the Confessions and so on. And some are novels. He's a very prolific writer, okay? And as I was gathering these information, I thought about this Wei Zheng. Wei Zheng wrote a short essay, which is just 3 paragraphs, as you can see below. It is his suggestion to his emperor, who is Tang Taizong. He said that you may be powerful and you can do anything you want, but in order to be successful, to be remembered by history, to make the people you govern happy and prosperous and like you and agree with you and help you to carry out your orders, you have to have 德. 德 is a word that he used. A ruler must have 德 in order to rule the people. And you can be very powerful, but if you have no 德, then the people will not follow you. And here is the words right here at the end of the second paragraph. It says, 愿不在大，可谓为人，在周复周，所宜深慎。 奔居所修所，岂可乎乎? Which means here, 载舟覆舟. He says the monarchy is like a boat. It floats on water, and the people are part of the water that floats the boat, and the water can carry the boat, and it can capsize the boat. It can tip over your boat, even though you are the monarchy. The people are the water. So the so-called 10 thoughts that he is advising the emperor appeared here in the last paragraph. All these things actually are just one thing. That is, you have to think whether you're doing the right thing for the people. And if you don't do it, no matter how powerful, you are going to be tipped over by the unhappy people. This is probably not, Wei Zhen was not the first person in China to think that way. However, it is way before any of the people in Western Europe started to think this way. So we have a Confucius who taught us a lot of great ideas 15 or 1600, 2600 years ago. Okay. And so we developed and we thought about it all these years. And in the 6th century, you have Wei Zhen who wrote this. And it appeared in my junior high textbook. I remember it so well. And if you are a West European person, you don't have these. You only study Bible if you're after Martin Luther. So for 15 or 2000 years, you had no Confucian ideas to guide your life and activity, behavior, and so on. But we have a very long history of the ruler being subject to the people's ideas and the consent. It is a very novel thing in Western ideas, and the Age of Enlightenment made them catch up really quick. In the period of French Revolution, Rousseau was the most popular of the philosophers among those who were in the revolution. And he was interned, so that his coffin was put in 16 years after his death. His coffin was put in the Pantheon, 万神庙或者是众贤庙、集贤庙。Okay, Pantheon. That's what I talked about and now finish about this Age of Enlightenment. Then we both go back to the vocabulary. This word is self-restraint, is to restrain yourself. The force that stops you from doing things comes from yourself. That's called self-restraint. And this word promiscuous, nowadays I almost always see this word as meaning 淫乱, but actually it means a lot of different kinds of 乱. When we say 淫乱, it means sexually promiscuous, but it can be another subject, for example, here under the second bullet, a sail caught by a promiscuous wind. So the wind was confusing and strong and in many different directions. So it caused the sail to not be able to handle this very weird wind. So the boat is maybe making violent moves. So this promiscuous wind is this description of the wind has nothing to do with sexual behavior. It is about the wind that is chaotic and careless and indiscriminate. So these are what this word could mean, but nowadays we almost always use this word as meaning a boy or a girl having many sexual partners, especially if indiscriminate in choosing such a partner. Okay, so think about the word promiscuous as being very confusing and chaotic and weird, instead of exclusively being about sexual behavior. Here we have the word withdrawal. And in the beginning, I said withdrawal symptoms. Then I thought withdrawal syndrome would be a better word. Syndrome would be a collection of many symptoms that are related to a certain disease or whatever. Maybe a disease that we did not find out what it is. We only know a collection of symptoms or syndromes of this disease. But once we know a disease, then we have a disease and we have all these symptoms associated with this symptom. On the other hand, we could have a lot of symptoms or a set of syndromes, and we don't know what the disease was. And in this instance, we're talking about when a person was addicted to something, for example, alcohol or some kind of drugs or mind-altering drugs or whatever. And after they were addicted to this, if you try or if they try to stop using this, they stop drinking or they stop taking drug, then something would happen. That is called the withdrawal. That is when you withdraw from addiction, then you have severe symptoms associated with this withdrawal. So withdrawal syndrome is the set of symptoms that comes with the fact that you are trying to stop taking something that you are addicted to, okay? Okay, and a short term to describe this withdrawal symptom is cold turkey. The second bullet says cold turkey. It is a slang used to describe somebody who stopped doing something, taking something he was addicted to very drastically, very quickly, so much so that he was having severe reaction and the bad effects due to this stopping of the taking of a drug. Sudden withdrawal from drugs such as alcohol, this and that, benzodiazepine pains and barbiturates can be extremely dangerous, leading to potentially fatal seizures. So it's not just that somebody decided not to take certain drugs and then feeling very bad. It's more than feeling very bad. It could be fatal. They could have seizures that would cause death. Okay, so this thing is called the withdrawal, and it could be about alcohol or some drug that are addictive. So there are three words. One is syndrome, which is translated into 症候群. So it's a set of symptoms. So symptom is just one of the symptoms. So they could be coughing or sneezing or a seizure or fever or whatever. each one of them is a symptom, and a set of them related to a situation could be called a syndrome. And the disease is just the name of the disease. Once you have a disease, you know what its symptoms are, but before you know there's a disease, or if the disease is not diagnosed, then you only know a set of symptoms. That's the difference between these words. And I remember watching this movie, which I don't remember much at all. It has Dick Van Dyke in the movie called Cold Turkey. It is in a small town where these people are against smoking, so they decide the whole town should just quit smoking immediately. And when you go cold turkey, the result could be quite chaotic. So this is a comedy, and it was directed, co-produced, and co-written by Norman Lear. He is a TV personality, very famous for his many pioneering work in TV series. Most of them could be a comedy, but they may not be. When it's a TV series that's a comedy, we call that a situation comedy, because day after day or week after day, week after week, it was the same people doing a similar thing in a certain place, but it goes on and on for years. Okay, so it's called the situation comedy. And Dick Van Dyke was the actor who played Mary Poppins, which is probably very popular, and you probably all have seen it. Mary Poppins is called the 欢乐满人间 with Julie Andrews, and Dick Van Dyke was the chimney sweeper in that movie, 扫烟囱的人. And when we say withdrawal, we naturally think of the word wean, which means 断奶. The baby would be drinking the mother's milk from birth, and then one day he could not do it forever. At one certain point, the mother would decide enough is enough. He is no longer going to have my milk. And that process is called wean. And it could mean that the mother weaning the baby, or the baby, well, the same thing is the baby is weaned from the mother, or the baby wean himself from mother's milk. So it's 主动跟被动都是用the same verb. And it can be used extending to other situations. For example, you are addicted or dependent or habituated on someone or something, and you decided to quit. To quit something that you are familiar with, you can use the word wean. And dilemma means that there are two paths you could follow, but both are pretty difficult. So you're in the conundrum. So you are in a difficult place, in the quandary, or in the pickle. Pickle is a slang for this kind of situation. You are in the pickle. Or after Joseph Heller wrote a book called The Catch-22, this word become very common. So you are facing a catch-22 situation, meaning you are faced with different situations or different ways that are both not perfect, not good to follow. So this is called the dilemma, 进退两难. And there's also a movie called The Catch-22, because that very popular book was made into a movie with Alan Arkin, among others. This is mortar and a pestle. It's just like that, as you can see, a beautiful pair of utensils in the kitchen or not necessarily in the kitchen. You can grind up spices or you can grind other things. And I deliberately tried and found this very old one. So you could, even though the one on the left is smooth and pure white and beautiful, we can find one. I mean, the human being used this kind of tool 22,000 years ago. So this is a very old invention. And you can see this just about in every civilization. If you go to the so-called ethnic museums or archaeological museums or historical museums of the native people, you can probably find one of these there. And my second topic, serious topic, is modern theater. Last time we talked about Chekhov. Okay, last time we talked about Chekhov, and he was a Russian playwright, and he also wrote many other things such as essays, books, and novels, and so on. But he is singularly famous for his plays, and he's not a prolific playwright because he wrote 4 very famous plays, while other people may have written hundreds, even thousands of plays. Chekhov wrote only a handful of them, and of the 4 of them we mentioned last time, they're called The Seagull, Uncle Vanya, 3 Sisters, and The Cherry Orchard. And they are stage plays, so even though I saw quite a few, maybe 2 or 3 of them in movies, I saw all of them on stage. So it's a wonderful experience to be able to see Chekhov play on stage. And he is quite original. It's very challenging, and the readers and the audience must pay huge attention while watching, while reading his plays, because it defies understanding. Anyway, but he was one of the younger of the 3 that we're going to talk about today, and they are Ibsen and Strindberg. Let's start with Ibsen. Ibsen is quite famous in China as well, but he is famous all over the world. And for one thing, he is Ibsen is the most frequently performed dramatist in the world after Shakespeare. You would think Shakespeare is the greatest, and he was the greatest ever. But Ibsen was second only to Shakespeare. And of course, Shakespeare's plays are very traditional, and Ibsen's plays are revolutionary. One of his famous play is called A Doll's House, 傀儡家庭. All these are made into a movie again and again and again. It was just so happened that the world's most performed play in 2006. So in 2006, somebody bothered to count all the plays in the world that were performed, and The Doll's House came in first. So years after he was dead, 100 and some years, he died in 1906 here. 1906, he was a pretty old person at that time. He was from Norway. You would notice that the 3 playwrights that we talk about today, from Ibsen to Strindberg to Chekhov, they are almost from the same place. And they are Ibsen from Norway and Strindberg from Sweden, and Chekhov from Russia. So it was just a tiny cluster of places in the world that started the modern theater revolution. We have Henrik Ibsen, or Henrik Ibsen, as one of the founders of modernism in theater. Ibsen is often referred to as the father of realism. In the old time, most of the stories were about heroes or romantic couples or the king's achievement of great kings and things like that. But Ibsen really started to write everyday people. They are just people that we could meet in our circle of friends and relatives. And he was one of the most influential playwrights of his time. And him being from Norway, he's got lots of traditional cultural thing, like ghosts. Lots of ghosts were in his stories. And we're talking about this, huh? Okay. So A Doll's House, I wonder if you have seen it. It is about misogyny, or it's about discrimination against the women, women's place in the world, such a lack of rights and dignity. And you would look at a family before Ibsen, oh, a family is a happy family if the woman does everything quietly and follow the husband's orders. And Ibsen says, no, that's not the way it should be. Women should have their own will and do their own things and have the respect in their family circles. And Ibsen is championing all these new ideas following the Age of Enlightenment, okay? That is the thing. He's more or less a person of 19th century, and everything in Western civilization that happened in 19th century were direct results of the Age of Enlightenment. So it appeared on the stage. There was a very great time that everybody loves to go to the stage to watch a play. That time is more or less gone because, technologies are so different now. But starting with Ibsen, he was revolutionary in bringing about the changes in modern theater. And he was one of the earliest. So he's really a 19th century person, when there was Strindberg and Anton Chekhov, who came much later. And then you have all around the world, you have George Bernard Shaw, Oscar Wilde, Arthur Miller, James Joyce, Eugene O'Neill. They all write plays, and they all read a lot of Ibsen's. You can see Ibsen all over the places in their play. So that's that.
We have seen his statue and his theater in Bergen, Norway.
Yes. Also in a theater in Oslo. But of course, he's a Norwegian hero. Yeah, he was welcomed with open arms in every country, no matter how far away. Yeah. In China, we also had our mini good time on the stage. When I was little, there were many more stage plays. Now, probably not so much. Things all move on to TV and movies. But there was a golden age of plays, stage plays. That was a good time, yeah. He completely rewrote the rules of drama with the realism which was to be adopted by Chekhov and others. And he was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature 1902, 03, 04, and then he died in 1906. These are the famous plays that he wrote. He wrote many of them. I've read probably 40 of them already. I read a whole collection of maybe 35 of them, and then I read more and more. And I went to see a lot of his plays on stage in London. If you ever go to London, make sure to go to one of the theaters and see some of their plays. I was there only twice, and each time I watched about 10 plays every day, every night. And they have all these Ibsen plays all the time, sometimes even more than one on the stage at the same time. And I was there the first time I saw Master Builder and the Brand. Master Builder had Patrick Stewart playing the Master Builder, and the Brand was played by Ray Fine. And A Doll's House, I've seen Jane Fonda in the movies playing in a version of A Doll's House, and there must be dozens of them. And last week I saw Hedda Gabler on YouTube. It is free if you're interested. It was so good. It's got Glenda Jackson as Hedda Gabler, and she was nominated for an Oscar for that role. So that's how good that was. And just go to YouTube and search for Hedda Gabler, and you will be able to watch it. It's such glorious play, yeah. And there are other plays that are tiny ones, like The Wild Ducks. The Brand is 3 hours with this character speaking in verse, 就是说他说的话通通是押韵的诗。3 hours of Ray Fine delivering poetry on stage, nonstop in the play Brand. However, Wild Ducks is only maybe half an hour or 1 hour long, very short ones, or Enemy of the People. And these are short, or Rosmer's Home, some kind of a castle. These were very short ones, and everyone is distinctly different and has a message to deliver. He wants to change the whole world. So I hope you would go home and watch Hedda Gabler. It is a great play. And this is in Oslo. I was going to see the museum, Ibsen Museum. Her museum is spelled Museet anyway, in Oslo, a place that he was his study, his home. And it was closed. I think when I check on internet right now, it says it's closed. So I don't know if it's closed from that time or now, but I could see and take these pictures through the glass door. Okay, these are what's in the Ibsen Museum. And the second playwright is either August or something like that. This word is from the emperor, Roman emperor after Caesar. That's called Augustus. So that means great. Augustus or August Strindberg is his last name, and he's like 20, 30 years younger than Ibsen, a Swedish playwright, novelist, poet, essayist, and a painter. Of all things, he's a painter. Prolific writer, 60 plays. We had Guan Hanqing, who wrote 69 plays, and all in verses. 元曲通通是押韵的。So writing 60 plays is an achievable goal. And Strindberg wrote 60 plays. And maybe Bernard Shaw wrote many more than that. I don't know. He's a great writer too. We call him GBS, George Bernard Shaw. And he wrote plays, and Strindberg, a bold experimenter and the iconoclast. Iconoclast means he breaks the icon, 偶像就是 icon. He breaks the mold of icon. So throughout his life, he was breaking rules and experimenting with different things. And he anticipated the coming of expressionism and the surrealism. So as things do change, these are the old people who first made the changes, but the artists are always trying to break new rules and make changes. And I don't know very much about Strindberg, and these are his famous plays. I've seen Miss Julie. That's probably the only one I saw, yeah. Anyway, if you have a list of things, and you can go on YouTube to look for them, and you will be able to find something. And these 3 slides are about Chekhov, which I presented last time. And after these 3 people who started the revolution in modern theater, they were followed by these. This is just one paragraph from a previous slide. And you have George Bernard Shaw, Oscar Wilde, Arthur Miller. And I'm thinking about George Bernard Shaw for next to the next movie. Our next movie is a Diary of Anne Frank, and I'm thinking about the George Bernard Shaw movie, which turns out to be My Fair Lady, but I'm going to ask you to watch the older version of My Fair Lady, which is called The Pygmalion. And James Joyce, he's getting weirder and weirder, and Eugene O'Neill, who's American, and Arthur Miller are both American, while the other 3 are English. And of course, the modern theater revolution goes around the world in many places, even in China. And we come to the last one, which is poppy. Poppy is a flower. It can be called Yu Mei Ren, but most people would call it Yin Su Hua. It is supposed to be deadly, but beautiful. Sometimes we use it to describe a woman, 蛇蝎女人. It's a flower and it's herbaceous, which means 是草本的herb 就是草类了，可是不一定是 grass 那种草，而是不是乌地的，所以叫做 herbaceous. And they were in many people's garden. I have some of them. I planted 4 kinds of poppies, but they were not the kind that produces opium. That is a narcotic opium drug. Narcotic 是麻醉药的. And this kind of poppy is called Papaver somniferum. Only this kind of poppy can produce opium, and it's not illegal to plant it, but it is illegal to use it to process, to make morphine or to make opium out of it. It has this analgesic trait, which means that 有麻醉的作用. If you take some kind of drug and then you became high or happy or oblivious of your surrounding, or you feel your surface floating on the air, it's because of its analgesic medicinal use, or analgesic value. Okay, I can say that. And it also produces edible seeds, and that we eat all the time. The edible seeds of poppy are like this. You can go to any grocery store and buy poppy seeds. and they're tasty. It's like a spice. You usually make bread or bagel or muffin by using a lot of it. But this is not an analgesic or a narcotic thing for you. Let's go back to this picture, which is a kind of poppy flowers that became the symbol of remembrance of soldiers who have died during the First World War, because there were a lot of them who died during the war, and their bodies were scattered about, and of course later collected and buried in graves. But the location is everywhere in Western Europe or even Central Europe. And this flower was wild there. That's why people saw the poppies, the red poppies of Mediterranean field poppies. They remember those who died. So they use it, for example, once in the tower castles in London a couple of years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, they put glass red poppies in the what? What's the word for 护城河 moat? I couldn't come up with the word. Anyway, the entire moat of the castle towers, yeah, I think so, it was filled with glass poppies. On the day they remember the armistice. Armistice is truth. And at the end of World War I, there was an armistice that ended the war. So the day in memory of that armistice day, the British people or the UK people put glass poppies there. Okay, so remember that there are obviously many kinds of poppy, such as California poppy, that does not produce opium. And this is an old thing. You could find evidence of poppy used as a drug or a medicine or whatever, 6,000 years before Christ. And you could find them in the Egyptian tombs, and you could find evidence in Sumerian people. Their artifacts contains traces of opium. And this was passed along the Silk Road from one place to another to very far away places. And this is one of the purple kind. And this is their seed pod. You would cut the seed pod and let the sap, S-A-P, which is the 白的姜汁, ooze from the seed pod, and you collect that sap and you would refine it into opium or heroin. And this is the California poppy that has nothing to do with opium. Okay, so we're coming to this song, which is I Dreamt a Dream. And sometimes it's spelled as D-R-E-A-M-T. It is the past tense of dream. So some people would still pronounce it as dreamed, but some people would pronounce it as dreamt. Okay, so we're going to do this song by Anne Hathaway. Let me stop share and stop a new one, which is, I hope, Where is it? Oh, okay. If I can't find it, I will see if I can try this one. Okay. I definitely closed the one that is. No, it's not here. Okay, this is it. That's pretty sad. So it's from the movie Les Miserables, sung by Anne Hathaway. Hathaway or something, okay. There was a time, well, in the beginning, almost the entire thing was read with no melody. There was a time when men were kind. It's about a relationship went sour. So she had a wonderful summer with some young man, and then she got pregnant, and the young man was gone forever, and she was left with a child, and she worked so hard trying to make ends meet and was unsuccessful, and she eventually died. And this child was trusted to an acquaintance who was Jean Valjean, who was the hero of this story. And even though 悲惨世界, he was a poor person who had to feed her sister's family with children, and they just couldn't manage. And he went out and stole a loaf of bread to feed the children, and he was arrested and was sent to prison for 19 years, I suppose, and he escaped. This is just about the society before French Revolution, when the rich was extremely rich. They were terribly rich, but the poor people could not live. And it's just miserable. Yeah, they're not only poor, they had no right, and there was no justice. For stealing a loaf of bread, you have to spend 19 years in prison. That is just horrible. Anyway, it really shows how the society was wrong. And some people would say we are experiencing such a time again, because better or worse, the richer people are too rich. Anyway, when their voices were soft, so she was describing how this boyfriend was behaving, and their words were inviting. There was a time when love was blind. The world was a song. When we say it was a song, means it's so very happy and cheerful. And the song was exciting. There was a time then it all went wrong. Okay, that's the first stanza. I dreamt a dream in times gone by. So all the good times were gone. She's still dreaming of such a time when hope was high and life worth living. I dreamt that love would never die. I dreamt that God would be forgiving. Then I was young and unafraid, and dreams were made and used and wasted. So there's 3 words in this sentence. It means the dreams were made and used and wasted. There was no ransom to be paid. So you don't pay a price for doing such things. No song unsung, no wine untasted. You go to the extreme to do everything, and you did not know there was a price to be paid. But the tigers come at night with their voices soft as thunder. They tear your hope apart and they turn your dream to shame. So all that happiness was gone in a minute. And the tigers with their voices soft as thunder, you know that thunder is not soft. He is the boyfriend. He slept a summer by my side. He filled my days with endless wonder. He took my childhood in his stride. 我们说 stride 是一种高昂的步伐，是一种步伐。I took something in my stride， 就是他志气高扬的，就这样子，took my childhood, but he was gone when autumn came. And still I dream he'll come to me, that we will live the years together. This is the last stanza, but there are dreams that cannot be. And there are storms we cannot weather. Weather a storm, 用 weather 来做动词，就是说经历不同的，主要是说不好的天气，而还能够come through， 这叫做 weather You weather the storm， 就是说你能够撑过这个暴风雨，而最后还没有受到伤害，这个叫做 weather the storm. I had a dream my life would be so different from this hell I'm living. 我现在是活在地狱里面，而我的梦呢，是跟这个地狱是完全不一样的So different now from what it seems now. Life has killed the dream I dreamt. Okay, so this is a poor girl who had a wonderful affair, but it was all gone, and she is left with a baby. And she had this baby, actually, at that time, she trusted or hired a couple of innkeepers to take care of the baby. And she would come in from time to time with money to pay them to take care of the child, while this evil couple of innkeepers, they did not take good care. They abused the child very much. And then Jean Valjean was played by Hugh Jackman in this picture, in this poster. The biggest face is Hugh Jackman. He came because he met Fantine, who's a mother, and he promised her that he would take care of this baby. And he did go to the innkeepers and took away this child. And he raised this child into adulthood until she met this new young boy in the revolution. And they're played by Amanda Siegfried, I guess so, and Eddie Redmayne. All these words in blue you don't have to read. It's just to say that this was a musical film based on a musical on stage, and that stage play was originally from a French version, and then which in turn was from a novel called Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, and in the year of 1862. That's the background of this story. And in the beginning, there was just a novel, but it's a huge novel. When I was young, maybe, I don't know, 高一or 初三的时候, I read this book, which is a tiny book. And then I realized decades later, 40, 50 years later, I realized that was not the whole book. The whole book was terribly long, very, very long, but I read the abridged version. Abridged 就是缩短的意思，你把 bridge bridge 就是一个桥嘛，对不对？ So you could have this word called abridge. Abridge means to shorten a story, to make a long story short, okay? So this is called abridge. Hugh Jackman as Jean Valjean or Valjean, anyway, 我们叫做上万进, He was the ex-convict. That means he was a convicted prisoner, but he escaped and became a free man because he escaped, okay? Then he became a respectable person, who was wealthy and maybe a mayor or somebody. So he was an ex-convict. And Russell Crowe is a bad guy whose name is Javert in this story, and he's a police inspector, and he was chasing after this escapee all throughout this story. In the beginning, you see this man escape from the prison, and the police inspector was after him, and he was after him and after him throughout the entire story until the end. And I've seen an interview of Anthony Perkins, who played Javert in one of the versions, and he said he understood that Javert was not a bad guy. He was just doing his job. He knew that this guy escaped, and his job was to look for him and put him back in the prison. So throughout the story, all the readers and the people who watch the show or play would hate this police inspector, but he was just trying to do his job, okay? And the mother is called the Fantine, and she was played by Anne Hathaway in this movie, in this clip. And she is the single mother of Cosette. Cosette is the little child that she gave birth to and who eventually grew up into a fine beauty. And she was played by Amanda Seyfried, okay? Yeah, Amanda Seyfried turned out to be a pretty good actress. Last I saw her was in the biography of Orson Welles as he was making Citizen Kane. Anyway, the making of Citizen Kane. Anyway, Amanda Seyfried was playing the mistress of the newspaper man called Hearst. What's his first name? Somebody may remember.
Randolph?
Randolph Hearst, yes, Randolph Hearst, thank you. I, in the beginning, did not know Randolph Hearst. He was an extremely powerful person and nobody could say no to him. And he owns the newspaper, and then he owned this castle on Pacific Ocean in San Simeon or San Simeon, anyway. And he has a wife, of course, and he has a mistress who's also openly a mistress of this rich and powerful person. And Amanda Seyfried was playing this Miss Davis in this movie with Gary Oldman, playing this one of the Mankiewicz brothers who wrote the script for Orson Welles' big monumental movie called The Citizen Kane. If you have never heard or watched The Citizen Kane, make sure you watch it. It is the singular most important movie in history. And Orson Welles was a genius. And that movie was about the making of the movie from the viewpoint of the script writer. And I don't remember his first name because there are 3 Mankiewicz all writing movie scripts, and he was one of them. One was Joseph Mankiewicz, and he could be Joseph. And there are 2 others. Anyway, Eddie Redmayne, who turned out to be a prolific actor, was famous in many movies, like The Danish Girl, playing a transgender person, and My Week with Marilyn Monroe. And he was in, the Harry Potter spin-off of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And he is in, as I mentioned last time, he was in The Theory of Everything about Stephen Hawking. Yeah, he's a very, very good actor, a young man who's not very handsome at all. And he had this small role of playing the boyfriend, the young man, revolutionary who falls in love with Cosette. And the evil innkeepers were played by Helena Bonham Carter and Sacha Baron Cohen. And they were together in the movie Sweeney Todd, which is also a musical with Johnny Depp. Anyway, this is a story about a turbulent time in French history. And we say it's about French Revolution, but it's only a part of the tail end of the French Revolution. I think Hugo wrote the story about the 1830s. Well, we all think French Revolution was in 1789. So this is like 40 or even more years after the revolution started, but France was in chaos for decades and decades, and there's a lot of suffering. And even at that late time, the revolution is still going on violently. Anyway, this is a good movie to watch if you have not watched it. One of these adaptations of Les Miserables. And I have here like 2 slides full of different versions of the adaptations of the novel Les Miserables. And of course, the older ones I haven't the opportunity to see. And the first one I highlighted was in 1952, and I did not see this. This is an American movie, and many of them were French. And the one I saw earliest was, of course, the 1958 version with Jean Gabin, who is French. It's a French movie. 约翰杰潘, that was what we could see at the time, only this 1958 version. But then I got to see a lot of them. For example, 1878, one that had Anthony Perkins as Javert, and you had Glenn Jordan with Richard Jordan. I don't know Richard Jordan. Anyway, I saw it on TV. And then there's one with Liam Neeson and Geoffrey Rush is a bad guy, Javert. Geoffrey Rush. He won an Oscar for being in the movies. sunshine, not sunshine, some kind of shy, about a person with probably schizophrenia or something. Yeah. You can usually win a prize if you play some handicapped person. That's the rule. And there are mini series with John Malkovich probably playing the bad guy, and the Gerard Depardieu playing the French protagonist, Jean Valjean. Okay. And there's the one that I just showed you, which is the most recent one, 2012, with Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, and Anne Hathaway. And there are, after that, a long TV series. And there are several other foreign productions. Some are French, and the one is a Japanese anime, a cartoon movie, Japanese. It's called the Shoujo Gazette. So the young girl was probably the principal storyteller. And here we have Anne Hathaway. She is stunningly beautiful with huge eyes. And I think she is Jewish too, just like Natalie Portman. They're all Jewish and very pretty. And this movie won 3 Oscars, including a supporting actress for Hathaway. For Jackman. Okay, Jackman. Okay. Oh, that's Golden Globe. I knew Jackman did not win an Academy Award. We're talking about Golden Globe, but at the end, we're talking about Academy Award, and Hathaway also won an Oscar for it. And it was nominated for 8 categories, including Jackman, but he did not win. Okay. And we have to talk a little bit about Hugo. We call him Hugo. Or we sometimes would mispronounce it as Hugo. So of course in English now, if somebody is named Hugo, you would call him Hugo because that's how you pronounce it in English. But Hugo is a French person, so his name is Hugo, Victor Hugo. And it's a 19th century person. He's a poet, novelist, essayist, playwright, and a dramatist of the Romantic movement. He is a huge person in history because he has such a strong voice advocating for the poor and the disadvantaged people. So you can say he's very progressive in his thinking. And everywhere else in the world, people know him as being the author of Les Miserables, 悲惨世界, or The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is 钟楼怪人. These two are extremely popular. However, if you are French and you read his books, and you read a lot more than what other people who can't read French were reading, then you would know him as a poet, or his long collection of poetry called The Contemplation, The Legend of the Ages. And he was okay. He has other plays such as Cromwell and Ernani. And Ernani was a play that eventually turned into an opera, Verdi's opera. I mentioned it once. It's about a bandit who was forced into banditry. He was an aristocrat, but his land was confiscated by the king. And the king was Charles V. There was one day I particularly picked Charles V as the topic, and he was in this opera called Ernani. And he is very talented in other ways. His novels are often turned into musicals and operas, and he himself did 4,000 drawings. So he's a painter. He make drawings in his lifetime, 4,000 of them. And he campaigned for social causes such as abolition of capital punishment. He was probably one of the very first to think that people, no matter what they did, should not be executed by the government, because that's just unkind. In his youth, he was born in 1802, when the revolution just started, and traditionally people still have a lot of royalist thinking. So he was brought up and was committed to royalist. He was a committed royalist. That is, he favors the monarchy. He did not like the revolution. However, as years gone by, he became a passionate supporter of republicanism, which means he supports that we abolish the king or emperors and establish a republic made of people, with people voicing their opinion in the government. So he became a Republican, or you say supporter of republicanism, okay? And he was a national hero and was interred in Pantheon, just like Rousseau was. Pantheon. Pan means many, Pan America or Pan something, while Theon means gods, 所以这叫做万神庙，就是 Pantheon, a building, a place where gods were buried. And in their view, these people were good politicians, good literature writers, and things like that. All kinds of artists are considered gods, and they were buried or interred. Interred means that their coffin was put in there, in the Pantheon, okay? Our last one was a 卓文君白头吟, 凯如山上雪，皎若云间月. This is about her dream as being the wife of her good husband. She was so pure. However, then one day suddenly, 闻君有两意，故来相决绝. I heard that you are having second thought. That means Sima Xiangru, her husband, was planning to get a concubine or to have a second wife. So I am here to cut it off with you, from you. I am going to savor our relationship. SEVER is to cut off. 今日斗酒会，明旦沟水头. So today we're still drinking tons of wine, but tomorrow we're like the water in the ditch, because the water could flow to the east or flow to the west. I and you are going to go our separate ways, just like the water in the trench. 谢蝶欲钩上, 就是 I make small steps on this grand trenches, and I saw the water was flowing in different directions. 凄凄复凄凄，嫁娶不须啼. There's nothing to cry about, even though I'm sad. 愿得一心人，白头不相离. I hope I would have a faithful man who would not leave me. We would not separate, even when we were old. 竹竿何袅袅，鱼尾何 shy. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know these words. She was looking at people who are fishing, and the fishing rods are so slender, and the fish was jumping around, flashing white, silver white. This is our tradition of writing Chinese poems. We would say something and we would say what we saw right now, right in front of our eyes. It's one of the method of poetry writing, which is a 复比心. The word 心 means that you see something and you feel something, you thought of something else. This is called the 心. 男儿重义气，何用钱刀为? In the old times, the coins were in the shape of a pair of pants or a knife. So when we say 钱刀, that just means money. A man should keep their integrity and be faithful and do the right thing. Money should not be an issue. Okay, so this is a poem which they say was written by Han Zhuo-Wenjun, but most people don't think so. It is saying from her point of view. For one thing, Zhuo Wenjun is very early in Han Wudi, the time of Han Wudi, because that's when Sima Xiangru was. And at that time, they were still doing four-letter poetry. That is 四言诗, 每一句有4个字. That's a grand tradition of Shi Jing. So you have to wait until Cao Zhi to come up with the five-word lines. So this is probably written much later than Zhuo Wenjun's time. Okay. And this segment came from the book called the 西京杂记. 西京杂记 was supposed to be written by Liu Xin, but maybe not. Liu Xin is the son of Liu Xiang, and Liu Xiang was a great prime minister and literature personality at that time, and so was his son. And his son, Liu Xin, helped him to do a lot of things, such as doing a list of all the books in publication. Right now, you can find or you can buy big books called the books in publication, or that's just a collection of every single article and a book and everything, whatever, that was published last year, and every year they would publish such a book. And in Han Wudi's time, Liu Xiang and Liu Xin worked hard to make such a list of all the books published, which eventually became 班固的汉书里面的 one of the chapter or volume of that was called I forgot that again. I can give you next time, which is the collection of all the names of books in print, which was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't say that. Okay, so this is a story about Sima Xiangru. When Zhuo Wenjun was 17 years old, she became a widow. Her young husband died, and she was in a very, very wealthy person, and everyone in town wanted to invite Sima Xiangru, who was visiting, to a party. And Zhuo Wenjun's father was successful in inviting Sima Xiangru. And Sima Xiangru knew that she was a widow, the beautiful woman, and Sima Xiangru wanted to see her too. And Sima Xiangru played a song. He was very good at playing the zither, and he played the Fengqiu Huang, which means a male bird seeking the favor from a female bird. beautiful, elegant birds. We now probably call them phoenix, but they were actually Simurgh from Iran. So in this playing of this zither, he expressed his love for this young woman, and the woman was totally moved by the song. And in that late in the night, when the party was over, this young widow went to the hotel where Sima Xiangru was staying, and they eloped. Okay, so that's the story behind their love and marriage. And the father was very angry and cut her off from the inheritance. That is, the wealthy father would not give them a dime to live on. So they were forced to sell wine in the market, 当奴卖酒. And she was very, very strong-willed and savored the relationship with her father. And the father eventually relented and agreed to give them money. But this poem was supposedly written when Sima Xiangru was rich and famous and older and wanted to get a second wife. And the Zhuo Wenjun was very unhappy. Some people think that was written by Liu Xin, but Liu Xin is still too early. I'm sorry, not that poem. That story in Xi Jing Zaji. Xi Jing Zaji was supposed to be written by Liu Xin, but this poem, maybe or maybe not, was written by the author of Xi Jing Zaji. And the author of Xi Jing Zaji may or may not be Liu Xin. Okay, this is a story, okay? Sima Xiangru was very famous for writing sumptuous, long fu, we call it fu. We used to say fu is a rhapsody, but no longer. We just say fu is fu. So if you want to know what fu is, you just go read some and you know what fu is. And fu is not exactly a kind of poetry. It is a long article describing a lot of things in a sumptuous way. So it could describe the royal hunt with the beautiful carriages and the animals. And it could be describing other things. We have some examples at the bottom, the last bullet, which says Sima Xiangru wrote 29 fus. And now we can read 6 of them. It's 虚上林大人长门美人哀二世. So the last one is apparently a critique of Qin Shi Huang's son, the second emperor of Qin, the second, okay? So he's lamenting that what he did wrong, this emperor did wrong to become the last emperor of the very short dynasty. However, 子虚赋, 上林赋, 大人赋, they're all about different things. 上林赋is apparently about the royal hunting lodge and hunting expedition. But 长门赋 is famous in a different way because there was an emperor who's probably before Han Wuti, who had lots of concubines and ignored his official empress. So this empress went out and hired Sima Xiangru to write a fu for her to complain about the emperor's 三心二意. This is called the Changmen Fu. So this empress was living in the part of the palace that nobody goes to, and that is Changmen. So this is about a discarded woman who happens to be an empress, and he's feeling a being not justified when the emperor discarded her and how she longed to be together. And after Sima Xiangru wrote this, the emperor changed his heart, and invited the empress back into his household quarters. Okay, so that's how powerful his writing was. Sima Xiangru was able to change the emperor's heart publicly. Okay, and he described, for example, the royal hunting expedition in such a great way that it's represented an era in our history that is the first one to be so strong and so prosperous. So he really is part of the rule of Han Di that exemplified his activities. So we're coming to the end about the next assignment. In 2 weeks, we're going to talk about Diary of Anne Frank. And last time I gave you this slide with a little change because I put this link under the 1981, but it turns out to be under the 2009. And the reason I found out is because I saw Felicity Jones. She could not possibly be in the movie made in 1980. So I do highly recommend you to watch the version, the 2009 version, not because the 1950 version was not good. I think that was still the very good version of it. However, it has no caption or no subtitle. So it's difficult for us to watch a movie, especially that old, probably the audio was not very clear. So in the beginning, I gave up on that and I watched this because this has the caption. But then I went back to watch that and I was able to finish it and more or less understand it pretty well. And here I have this. I don't know if you can see this. Let me see if I can see myself. I really can't. Can you all see this in front of me? Okay. Anyway, this is the version of 1959, and I borrowed it from the library. And I got it this morning and I opened it and watched it somewhat, and it's got perfect subtitles. So if you want to see the good version with a good subtitle, you can go rent it somewhere if you find it, or you can reserve it from the library. And it is a good one to watch, I think. Okay, so there are two choices, and you can pay to watch it with good subtitle, or you can watch it for free with no subtitle. So these two versions are what I can find. And there are other versions I could not find. They are often in snippets, like 2 minutes or 3 minutes, not the full movie. But I hope you would watch at least one of them. And when this, there's another one, another version of this movie. It's not from the diary, but it's from the person who supported the Anne Frank and her families. And this is the 1988. Pardon me? Okay, so these are the books. If you could read one of the books, that's fine too. So when you come to the class next time in 2 weeks, you would have watched at least one of the movies and something else you're interested in, for example, the other movies or the books and so on. And this one I'm going to talk about because I read recently The Betrayal of Anne Frank. That's a new book, 2022. So you would come up here and say something. You could tell us a story about it or the background about the Holocaust, the killing of 6 million Jews by Nazi Germany, or you can talk about other people in similar situations, and whatever you want to talk about, or you can talk about any actors or actresses in any of these movies that you're interested in, because I'm trying to get you to speak in English, and anything you want to say is something better than not saying it. Okay, so this is it for today. Is there anything you want to say? Okay, any comments? I really cannot see any of you, or myself. That is sad. Okay, any questions? Oh, one thing I remember from this talk is if you could see Ibsen, Henrik Ibsen's play called Hedda Gabler, Hedda Gabler, okay? That is a wonderful movie. It's a movie, and was nominated for Oscars, but it was just like a play. They pretty much follow the confine of the play. There's hardly any that are outdoors. Yeah, when you make a play into a movie, the first thing is you want to find some part outdoors that you can put different things in there to make it different from the confine of the stage. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, that is today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 谢谢。
不客气.
Okay.
Let's see, okay, we have someone who posted the Hedda Gabler. Okay, if you are Li Shu, Li Shu found this Hedda Gabler link on YouTube in chat if you want to open the chat and copy the link. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
谢谢，拜拜。